Hello and welcome to 2025, and also Moderate Fantasy Violence, a podcast about 2024 and all the things we enjoyed during it. I'm Nick.
And I'm Alastair.
And, as ever, it's time for us to get into the same room for the one time of the year we're allowed to see each other in person and have a chat about all our favourite film and television from the last year, including, of course, our beloved top fives. But before we get into all that sweet statistical action, Alastair, what else have you consumed in the last fortnight?
Well, I've recently finished a show that came out towards the end of this year, so I'm pretty much wrapping up my 2024 viewing, and that's Dune Prophecy. Probably won't surprise anyone listening to this podcast that, yep, I watched the Dune show, as I do love Dune.
Yeah, I basically watched the Dune show entirely because I thought we would probably at some point need to speak about it on this podcast. Considering it's ended up getting consigned to the recommendation section, I could probably have just not bothered, but no, I saw the whole thing. I'm here, fully informed.
Well, the time has come to discuss it. Yeah, and overall I enjoyed it as a show. I do think it's possibly one more for the fans, maybe fans of the book and the extended universe, or if you just really, really like the film and want more from it. I guess it's not this sort of, thing I think it's like to have huge mainstream appeal like the film has been, like a big blockbuster that also does work hard to involve everyone, even someone who's never seen anything Dune related before, in the plot. Whereas this is possibly a little bit more geared towards people who at least have seen the films and know the kind of the vague premise and what's going on. Although it is set 10,000 years before the film, so you don't need any particular knowledge, and it is in some ways quite a separate story. But it does use a lot of the familiar things from the films. You know, the mention of the planet Dune, Arrakis, the Empire, the Bene Gesserits, all of those sort of things. But if you did really enjoy the film and you like the universe, then I would recommend this show on that basis.
Yeah, as I say, I watched this, and being not quite as big a Dune fan as Alastair, I quite enjoyed it. I think I would say I thought it was decent. I found it quite dry in its sci-fi, very, very desert-like, very much just presenting us with the universe and then just getting on with it. It's not really, desperately trying to make us like it in the way that some things, the obvious reference is the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but even Game of Thrones had a fairly regular tick, tick, tick of like cool character moments or jokes to make sure we were still paying attention, or just having someone get their tits out, which actually, to be fair, they do in this show. That is the one Game of Thrones trick they do employ. There's a bit of the old sex position going on here to really ram home, so to speak, some of the more bone dry universe exposition. Anyway,
it's both a sex joke and a Dune joke.
Yeah, there we go. And I'm not even the Dune fan. Maybe that's why I could do it. That's because I just don't respect Dune. I thought it was a pretty decent sort of sci-fi intrigue political show. It wasn't really trying very hard to be entertaining, and I did sometimes find my attention wandering a bit, but it was well made. It had some very good actors in it, including Mark Strong, and the two actors playing the two witch sisters, whose names I have shamefully not looked up, were both very good. And in fact, a lot of I would probably say that the witch Bene Gesserit sisterhood stuff was probably the part that held my interest the most. There was a couple of episodes where it really focused in on that, and those were definitely my favourite episodes. There was one with a lot of flashbacks to the sisters' past. Again, very good, enjoyed that a lot. The parts where we spent more time in the palace were, to be honest, of less interest to me.
Yeah, I thought it got better as it went along and sort of united its various plot threads and kind of ramped up the tension. It did spend some time introducing things, I guess, as happens with quite a lot of shows. Yeah, once it all kind of got going and it kind of, there was sort of the twists, the intrigue and things like that really mounted up, it was very tense and things like that, which is, there's a lot of scheming, which the Bene Gesserits are good at. I do like, the plotting and sort of the conspiracies, the plans within plans, as they say in the film. So on that basis, it was very entertaining and things like that. And they kind of brought it all together in a final sort of climactic episode that links all the plots, links the Imperial plot together with those involving the Harkonnens and the Atreides and the Sisterhood. And the other thing also is that this wasn't so much another Atreides versus Harkonnen story, although the main characters are Harkonnens and there are some Atreides in it. But they didn't decide to go with just something that was very similar to the books and what we're familiar with. So that made it slightly different and slightly interesting.
Yeah, and in a similar vein, they also, even though this is, I guess, technically a prequel since it takes place, as Alastair said, 10,000 years before the events of the Dune film and novel, it didn't cram in too much prequel shit. It didn't spend too much time showing us how Paul got his legendary suit of rags or something, or Zendaya's birth or whatever. This stuff may yet come up in season 2, who knows. But yeah, for now, they actually did a decent job of, using the Dune universe as backdrop without just obsessively showing us where things came from in a way that no one outside of hardcore Dune fans like Alastair could possibly care about.
Yeah, that's the mistake that a lot of prequels make. I think also prequels that are set directly before the story that they're trying to tell, or things like that. I mean, there was, I think, some of this. I mean, you see the origin of the voice, you see the origin of the Gom Jabbar, the Sarduka, the litany against fear. Those things are sort of hinted at, although they're kind of more kind of woven into the plot. Maybe their origins as asides. You don't really need to understand, what these things are when they're being introduced, such as, just when the Emperor character has like a sort of personal guard of hard-called soldiers formed. That's obviously the origins of the Sarduka, but they're on Seleucus Secundus, which becomes the Sarduka training world. So there is, I guess, those nods to the broader continuity, but I think the crucial thing is they don't take over the plot and make it kind of, I don't know, the main point being this is where this thing came from.
Yeah, I mean, I made a Game of Thrones comparison earlier, but I guess the more accurate comparison is probably House of the Dragon, which also takes place in a similar, the same universe, but for the most part avoids dripping itself in prequel stuff too much. So yeah, they've done a similar decent job here, I think.
Yeah, and also it's one that's set quite a long time before the story that you're familiar with. Maybe not as long as 10,000 years, but by creating that distance, it means that you can tell a sort of separate story without, for example, telling the story of something that happened literally just before the familiar story.
Yeah, and as I say, I thought it did a decent job of telling a compelling story. I at times maybe ran a bit slow. I'm not going to deny it. Part of me did watch some of them and think, could this have been shorter? Did we need 6 episodes? Did the last episode need to be nearly the length of a feature-length movie? But yeah, it was compelling enough for the most part. Certainly by the end of each episode, I felt like something had happened.
Yeah. And I like the way that it sort of jumped through time a bit, in the sense that it had like the kind of the younger versions of the main characters, and you saw what they got up to, and then the older versions, which again, you kind of had these like two kind of concurrent plot lines evolving in time, which again were brought together at the end.
Yeah, as I say, the episode with the flashbacks I thought was probably one of the best ones, just for telling a sort of self-contained, compelling story. And it came back quite nicely at the end of the penultimate episode, which was a nice moment where a bunch of storylines came together to lead to a big cliffhanger. And even though they didn't explicitly spell out what was happening, I immediately got it, which is normally a sign that, the storytelling has been successful. Yeah.
That's the thing, you've been successfully brought into the story and taken along. I mean, it doesn't have a lot of the stuff that made the Dune films a success, I guess largely because they don't have the budget of a major Hollywood production, such as Denis Villeneuve's really striking visual style and the music and things like that, and a sort of very high level of production design. There is a lot more of people having conversations in corridors and things like that, but I guess that is just the difference between TV budget and film budget, especially like A-list sort of film budget.
Well, yeah, inevitably you get to see a sandworm briefly at the beginning and briefly at the end.
Yeah, that kind of CG is expensive.
Yeah, to be honest, as I say, it's a bit dry. If you're not into, I guess, quiet, subdued sci-fi intrigue, but I imagine you may find it a bit of a slog at times, and I do think the very end was perhaps a bit of a frustrating photo sequel. I would slightly like to see a bit more actually be resolved. They did announce this has been renewed for a second season about 3 or 4 days before they dropped the last one, and part of me thinks they did that so that we would come away knowing, but yes, we know, we haven't resolved about half the plots, but we will. There is going to be more. Would have still liked a more final ending, personally.
Yeah, but at least it's not that really disappointing circumstances when, they do these shows and they just get canned after one season and then you have no idea where it's going or what's going to happen, and you're just kind of left forever wondering. But maybe this is very much a part one of a story rather than, I don't know, a complete story.
Yeah, possibly. As we will get to when we talk about TV in general, I do think there's a vague sense of TV shows being kind of the first act of a contained 2 to 3 part story nowadays, in a bid to avoid the acts of cancellation. Please don't kill us. We only need 3 seasons.
Or making much more of an effort to tell a complete story rather than things like, Game of Thrones spawned a lot of kind of epic arcs of stories that were clearly going to be very, very long, but obviously a lot of these got canned before they got anywhere at all. I mean, the first series of Game of Thrones is pretty much setting up everything that's going to come afterwards. The things people liked it because it's very entertaining setup.
Yeah, it's more entertaining than this, to be honest, but
yeah,
there you go. As I say, it is what it is. It's dry sci-fi for people who like their sci-fi taken seriously.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and Game of Thrones makes a lot of effort, as saying, to ingratiate itself. I mean, it's not for nothing that everyone kept saying things like, it's like fantasy but good, which obviously I found quite insulting, annoying, a reductive opinion. But I think what people realise is, or what they meant, is that they have this view of fantasy being a lot of discussions of complicated lore and you need to understand all this stuff and things like that, whereas like, no, this is relatively accessible. And I don't know how accessible Dune Prophecy is to people who haven't read the books, but I guess that's one of the reasons why it's not been as popular as Game of Thrones or the films of Dune.
I was, to be honest, pleasantly surprised that they did renew it for a second season, because while we were watching it, I did not get the feeling it was making that much of an impact on the discourse. I believe I may have said to Alastair in a pub that I didn't think it was likely to get renewed, so hopefully there would be a real ending. But I was wrong on all counts.
Yes, well, at least it did get renewed. And yeah, this hasn't had a huge impact, certainly not the impact the films have had, and it's not been something that seems to have captured people's imagination, and people are hanging on waiting for the final episode. I did see some people tweeting about it and, kind of saying they're enjoying it or invested in it, but then again, they're the sort of people who watch a lot of science fiction shows and also read a lot of science fiction books, so I guess they are the target audience, but a show can't survive based on just appealing to the hardcore fans. I guess it has to appeal to someone beyond that.
Yeah, but I guess this has appealed to enough someone's, so fair enough.
Yeah, well, keep listening to the podcast, and then we'll probably share our thoughts with season 2 when it airs. Who knows when that will be, because it might be 3 years between seasons, as sometimes is the case. But anyway, that's what I've been up to over the Christmas period. Nick, what have you been watching?
Well, in another bit of topical catch-up, I have watched the new Doctor Who Christmas special, Joy to the World, which aired, well, as we're recording this, only a few days ago, on Christmas Day, on BBC One, just like in the old days. Well, I'd also just like the previous year, to be fair. This, of course, is a new episode written by Stephen Moffat. Again, we're going back to the past here. But, of course, starring new Doctor Ncuti Gatwa, living out the traditional Doctor arc. I think I've seen in quite a few of these Christmas specials where he's just got his separate ways with his companion at the end of the previous season, and now he's a bit lonely, and he's going to meet a guest character, and they're going to tell him that he shouldn't be alone. And also, he's going to go to a hotel which exists in various places throughout time and explore a mystery orchestrated by an evil weapons company. And also guest starring Nicola Coughlan of Derry Girls and Bridgerton fame as the titular Joy. So yep, we have seen this. New Stephen Moffat Doctor Who. Alastair, what did you think?
Well, I enjoyed it as an episode, and yeah, I thought it was a good Christmas special. I mean, yeah, they've done quite a lot of Christmas specials over the years. The quality has varied. This is one of the more entertaining ones. Yeah, it kind of did everything you wanted from a Christmas special in that it told a self-contained story, again, maybe a bit more accessible to the people who've just tuned in on Christmas Day to watch Doctor Who because it's an event, rather than the people who are following the show, in that you can kind of just pick up this episode as it stands alone. But yeah, it's got a nice little warm, fuzzy Christmas message bit. There was definitely a tear in my eye at a few moments. I guess we might get into specifics, but I don't want to drop spoilers. And I did think Nicola Coughlan was very good. I'd pretty much watch her in anything. And yeah, she's very talented. So, and Ncuti Gatwa was great. And they worked well together. So yeah, it was definitely entertaining Christmas fun.
Yeah, no, it was enjoyable. Stephen Moffat's record on the Christmas specials has been up and down over the years, but I think this is one of his better ones. He's got a clear idea and he explores it. It felt, if anything, pleasingly old school to me. I think some of the Ncuti Gatwa season we watched last year, well, still this year as we're recording, but last year for you, was trying to do some slightly different things with magical beings and gods and such, which was interesting. But this very much felt like a Doctor Who Christmas special that could have aired at any point in the last 20 years. Any of the Doctors, they'd have probably approached it differently. But any of the Doctors could have been dropped into this story and done something in it. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. It's quite nice to see Ncuti Gatwa get dropped into one of these stories and just doing Doctor Who things and feeling like the Doctor. It very much felt like he's pretty entrenched in the role at this point, and that's nice to see. It definitely felt like Moffat was writing his Doctor rather than, a insert Doctor here episode. There's a lot of stuff about, his emotional openness, which is, I think, a big part of his interpretation of the character. So yeah, no, I enjoyed this. It, as ever with Moffat, felt like he was cramming a lot in, a lot of concepts, a lot of little bits the Doctor was jumping through. But I don't know, especially after watching all those Jodie Whittaker episodes, I'd rather watch Moffat try and do too much than watch Chris Chibnall do very little. So yeah, quite enjoyed this.
Yeah, it had a sort of complex looping time structure plot to it, which is a sort of traditional Moffat sort of thing. But there were some really nice sort of character moments and some real warmth to it, which I liked. I mean, I kind of especially like the bits quite early on when the Doctor has to spend a year just on Earth working in a hotel, hanging out with the only other person who worked there, and they sort of become good friends and things like that. And just, yeah, again, like spend a whole year together. And it's just one of those sweet things when, like, the Doctor learns something about the magic of ordinary life, and, his kind of love of everyday people and their idiosyncrasies is reaffirmed. It's just like a sweet little, I don't know, montage bit, but I don't know if it really particularly added anything to the plot, but it was just fun and entertaining to watch and moving.
I think thematically there was something that Moffat was trying to say. Again, it's good when he actually tries to say something other than look how clever I am. About, loneliness at Christmas and being alone at Christmas and how, it's a struggle and, some of us are stuck with it and sometimes it's not great.
Yeah.
I think there was at least an attempt to engage with that, which is one of the reasons why I think this episode works. And I think that montage, even if it was a bit extraneous to the plot, and one could argue it could have been cut so that we could have had a bit more time with Nicola Coughlan, but I do think it added something to the theme.
Yeah, and it added to the point of the episode, which is that the Doctor needs someone around, which obviously bridges nicely to, I guess, the first episode of the next season when the Doctor will find someone and meet someone around. I mean, that's not too different from the theme of the Christmas special they did with Catherine Tate, or the Christmas special they did with Kylie Minogue and probably several others as well, when basically the Doctor's alone. He has a heartwarming encounter with someone and realises it's good to have someone around.
Yeah, as I said earlier, it's a very common beat, and because of the positioning of these Christmas specials between seasons, they often end up having to have this beat. But, it's a good beat for a Christmas special, It's nice to have people at Christmas. It's not a hard beat to pull off with a character like the Doctor. So, yeah, it's here again. It works. It's nice to see Ncuti Gatwa get to do one of the big Doctor Who beats and show us his spin on it. And yeah, I thought this was a fun little self-contained moment. There's not too much power of love stuff. I think it holds together. There's maybe an element of magical, and then it just turned out right stuff at the end, which maybe we'd be a bit harsher on were it not Christmas.
Yeah.
But for a Christmas special, I think it works pretty well. I think it's a decent episode, and it was just nice to see him again.
Well, it's not a end of season. It's just more of a one-off Christmas story. Yeah, and I guess it had the Russell T Davies nature of it went big at the emotion at the end. Yeah, again, I had a tear in my eye during the final conclusion when the story's all wrapped up. Don't want to drop spoilers for the people who haven't seen it, but yeah, he kind of went big on the emotion and did move me to tears. So I think if he was aiming for a big emotional moment right in the end with some kind of magical Christmas stuff going on, then it worked. I suppose it worked on that basis.
Well, yeah, again, tiptoeing around the spoilers, yeah, he does cut back to something very, very real, always surprisingly real for a Stephen Moffat Christmas special, which does give it a bit of weight but stops it just being, I don't know, magical flim-flam. So yeah, no, I thought this was pretty strong. As Doctor Who Christmas specials go, I thought this was one of the decent ones.
Yeah, and a good setup for the next season. Yeah, and I think you made a good point, which is that Ncuti Gatwa feels really settled into the role now. And it feels like established. We don't have to establish his Doctor, his dynamic, things like that. Everyone's familiar with him in the role. Yeah, so that's the point where they can basically do some great just Doctor Who adventures. There's no need to establish stuff. We can just run with it with the next season. So yeah, obviously they'll be establishing the new companion, but bringing the new companion is what keeps the show fresh. But we do have a Doctor that everyone's behind and everyone's emotionally invested in this version of the Doctor. I'm excited for the next season and hopefully some good stuff will follow.
Yeah, I mean, the downside of the last season being relatively short is but the gap between them establishing him and setting stuff up at the beginning and getting to the two-part epic conclusion at the end was quite short. And it's nice to have the chance to have more sort of standalone adventures with this Doctor, because it doesn't feel like we've had as many as we had with previous ones in the one series. So yeah, good stuff.
Okay, so now the moments you've all been waiting for, which is our top films of the year, followed later by our top TV of the year. So for those unfamiliar with the format, Nick and I will be counting down our top 5 films of the year and trying to arrive at a consensus on an MFV top 3. We're also probably discussing worst film of the year and a few honourable mentions. However, before all of that, it's probably worth taking a moment to reflect on what kind of a year it has been. And for me, personally, the year in film didn't start off great. It had a sort of fairly middling, at best, opening on New Year's Day this year, well, last year, when you're listening to this. I went to see Taika Waititi's new film, Next Goal Wins, which was really middling to poor. It wasn't particularly funny. I mean, it's got a bit of the Taika Waititi charm, and even a good performance by Michael Fassbender couldn't save it. So it wasn't a great opening to the year. BFI Film Festival wasn't particularly strong this year. Some of the big films like Night Bitch and that new Elton John documentary got some quite bad reviews. There was also a sort of shortage of really good films that I had for drawing on my top 5. Did struggle a bit more than usual. There's definitely a lot of good stuff, things that had merits, but in terms of best 5 films of the year, that was a little bit difficult. difficult. So I don't know. It's not necessarily been a great year, but there has been some good stuff, which I'm sure we will come to.
Yeah, I don't know. I never feel fully qualified to say it's been a bad year in cinema because I'm not really as immersed in the world of cinema as Alastair is. But certainly from the perspective of the sort of films we often cover for this podcast, the mainstream adventure films with often a hint of sci-fi fantasy and of course a bit of the old moderate fantasy violence. Yeah, it's not been a great year for those. Partly probably because of both the big superhero franchises taking a bit of a year off to, I don't know, take stock and recalibrate with their post-Jonathan Majors or post-James Gunn vibes or whatever it is they're both doing. We'll find out next year. But yeah, and I don't really know if anything has hugely stepped up to replace them in that area of the mainstream, and a lot of the things that have tried have kind of fell flat. Like Furiosa kind of farted off the tail end of the old DCEU. All flops roundly. There's been a few high-profile flops. There's, of course, been the superhero films we have had. The entries from the Sony extended universe of vaguely associated Spider-Man characters have all been, famously bad. It's been a bit of a strange year from that regard. I will say I didn't actually have that much trouble populating my top 5 in the end. I think there have been enough of the sort of weird or indie or psychologically horror-y films that I've enjoyed to fill it out. I might have had trouble if I had to get to a top 10. Like, I will be doing a top 10 TV shows for the website, and we'll get to that. But the top 10 films might have been a bit of a struggle.
Yeah. I mean, there has been a lot of breaks this year. It didn't create like a huge vacuum for something new to come in and shake things up. But there were definitely some good moments this year. I thought this year's Oscars was one of the strongest slates we've had in a long time. Some brilliant films in there, especially like Zone of Interest. Absolutely disturbing. Yeah, one of the most fucked up films I've ever seen. It's very good if you like that sort of thing. Anatomy of a Fall, very, very tense. Yeah, and really, really interesting, well done film. The Holdovers, American Fiction, these are all things that we liked. Really, the only disappointing Best Picture nominee this year was Maestro, and Maestro was just a bit forgettable, really. It was quite well made, I thought. Overall, not a bad year for the Oscars, so that's always a good sign.
Yeah, it hasn't made my precious top 5, but Poor Things was decent as well.
Yeah, that was a good film. Yeah, I like that a lot. It's a good year for Yaris Varoufakis. I can't remember how you pronounce his name. Sorry,
like
should have looked that up.
Him and that's in Kinds of Kindness.
Yes, which was another dark, twisted, surprising film that he did this year. 2 films in a year, both of which were very good. So yeah, there was definitely some good stuff out there if you were sort of scratching beneath the surface.
Yeah, no, it does slightly feel like mainstream Hollywood is on a bit of a, oh god, what now? What do we do? If they don't want superhero franchises and endless vague spin-offs of shit, what do they want? But it does feel like, the cinema outside that is still chugging along at least.
Yeah. I mean, as you said, like Furiosa wasn't as fresh as the original.
It wasn't awful to me.
I liked
it. Too much of a bitch about Furiosa. It didn't seem to do that well.
It also didn't make loads of money. And obviously other things have been high-profile flops from, as you mentioned, Madam Web, Craven the Hunter, and obviously, the indignity of Francis Ford Coppola's complete meltdown.
Yes, I forgot about Megalopolis.
Yeah, that's another bad moment of the year.
Did you see that in the end?
No. So I guess with my, critic responsibility hat on, I can't say. I guess I can't slag it off because I've not seen it, but no one I know who's seen it has liked it. But I guess there was some high-profile stuff that did well. We quite liked Gladiator 2. We thought it was, at least good. It could have been a kind of completely pointless sequel, like, just a nostalgic cash-in, but actually it was all right. We enjoyed that. Yeah. We enjoyed Venom.
We quite enjoyed Venom, we quite enjoyed Alien Romulus. These are all like sequels to things that arguably didn't need sequels. Yeah, I don't know, it does still increasingly feel like a bit of a wander down a blind alley, but I don't know, fortunately it's not my job to save Hollywood.
Well, nothing feels like it's going to be the new future thing, especially if people are, losing their interests in superhero films, sequels, remakes, spin-offs, reboots.
Well, yeah, and it's not ultimately, I don't know, people talk a lot about the need to find the next big thing. I'm not sure the world has actually benefited from all the major films for about a decade being superhero films, so maybe it would be good if there wasn't another single big thing. But yeah, I don't know, it would be nice if it felt like there was a bit of an engine driving these sort of fun adventure films, because I do like them still.
I mean, a lot of people are saying things like, oh, it's, video game adaptations are going to be next, or classic sci-fi books are going to be next, or, some other form of IP that hasn't been plundered as mercilessly as the superhero space has. But maybe we just live in too siloed a time where to have something that everyone agrees on and things like that, as we can't even agree on we all like superheroes, which was at least we agreed on for a while as the thing.
I don't know, normally when people say that, something else comes up. But having said that, was there a big single film that everyone loved this year? I guess not.
Yeah, well, Dune was pretty popular. That was a big one. I mean, in terms of what made the most money, people really liked Inside Out 2,
which we saw, and again, spoilers not coming for the best top 5, but it was again another arguably needless sequel that was a decent enough time, I guess.
Yeah. there's no sign of things changing, but also, there's no sign of Hollywood doing anything different. And
well, it's sort of the endless financial crunch of it, isn't it? The increased concern about spending the huge amount of money on anything even vaguely risky if there's a chance it might not return, which I guess is leading to some quite conservative decisions, which I think is increasingly bumming people out, which is perhaps leading them to them not going to see the films, which is only leading to more conservative decisions. The vicious conservative cycle.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. And there's lots of other factors, cost of living, lean economic times means people have less disposable money for fun things like films, things like that. Films getting more expensive to make. We had strikes last year. I mean, people keep talking about that, like, streaming services and AI are going to completely change things at some point, but it's not really much evidence of that actually happening.
I mean, the main thing that people don't seem to like about a lot of current films is that they're a bit obvious and derivative of existing things, and I'm not sure generating stuff from AI is going to make it less obvious and derivative.
No, that's the point.
I was just reading yesterday, as of this recording, but they've delayed the sequel to The Batman from 2026 to 2027. If you can't find it in you to film
Batman,
a sequel to an existing property, but you've already got the cast and director for, because, I don't know, you're too scared to spend the money or something, then, I'm not advocating everything being Batman, but it seems a bit directionless, guys. It seems like you don't really know what you're doing.
Yeah, people like Batman, it turns out, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the spin-off show to that has just done quite well, People even like the Batman show that doesn't have Batman in it.
Yeah, and he's barely mentioned, yeah. I mean, the thing is, as we pointed out on the podcast, is people like things that are good. And, whenever, like, a big hit comes along, it's usually because it's good. It's been well made. The Batman's a good example. It was well-directed, well-written, well-scripted. Robert Pattinson was good. Again, Dune was a success because it's a good film made by a very talented director, very talented cast and a very talented creative team. I mean, it's a great story and it's a hard story to tell, but there's real potential in there if it's told well. And it was told well and it became like an event. And that's what people liked outside the people who just really like classic sci-fi novels. It's not because classic sci-fi is this great gold mine of untapped IP in and of itself. It's just that a director made a good film. So if we just get like endless new versions of Down Below Station, Rendezvous with Rama, Foundation, which I suppose they are doing, A Fire Upon the Deep, all the rest of them, those people would just get bored of battles in space.
They did a decent enough job of Deadpool and Wolverine. It wasn't a particularly amazing, coherent movie, but it was a fun enough series of silly comedy sketches, and as a result they were rewarded for it with a big pile of money. So clearly when you make the thing people want and do a decent enough job of it, again, as Alastair just said, people will turn out.
Yeah, exactly. But there's no like pattern to it. It's not like people are dying for video game films or people are dying for this, that and the other. I mean, I guess there is a market for nostalgia. That's maybe why people like Gladiator or something like that, or Sonic films.
Yeah, I haven't seen the new Sonic film, I'm afraid, so I can't include an opinion on that in my end-of-year review. As with the last two and the Knuckles spin-off show, it'll be on streaming eventually.
I'm sure it'll be fine.
Yes, that is the likely outcome based on previous experiments.
Yeah, but, looking to the future next year, I don't see things changing loads. I mean, so, we've got next year installments in Mission Impossible, 28 Days Later, Jurassic Park, Superman, Captain America, and other extended Marvel stuff, including a new version of the Fantastic Four, a new John Wick spin-off, and a Minecraft film, just to name a few.
Yeah, I mean, not to drag things inexorably back to superheroes, but I guess, if anything, that's my role on the show. But yeah, the fact that Marvel are coming back next year with a relatively full slate of like 3 films and I think solid 4 or 5 TV shows. It's going to be interesting if that works out for them. It's going to be interesting if the people are reinvigorated by having had a year off, or if the general response is, oh no, not that again. I mean, certainly I'm somewhat of a target for this stuff. But there are a few I'm sort of gently interested in. The only one I'm really, actively excited for and will be disappointed if it's bad is probably the new Daredevil season. Yeah.
Well, we'll come to the TV, I guess. But here's the thing: if Fantastic Four turns out they've got they've got a good cast, and if they've got a great director, a good script, and it works well, and you get a film that's as seems as well made as the first Black Panther, the first Guardians of the Galaxy film, something like that, then turns out it'll be a big hit. Everyone will go to see it, and then all the sort of stories of like Marvel's dead will be swept away by Marvel's back. They've redeemed Marvel, and it's like they just made a good film, and funny enough, people like it. Simultaneously, if it's just about as sort of middling as the second Doctor Strange film, then probably people won't see it.
Yeah, I think the difference is that possibly even if Fantastic Four is really, really, really good, and I would like to see someone do those characters well, because they do have an appeal, then I don't know if it will necessarily drive people to consume every atom of Marvel-related content in the way that they perhaps have in the past. I think perhaps that level of hunger for spin-offs might be coming to an end, which again isn't necessarily a bad thing.
I mean, yeah, it's like maybe people won't see the Captain America film because they're not, so au fait with the new cast and it's not stellar. But they do go to see Fantastic Four because characters are better known and it's a better film. Yeah, that'll indicate that, well, people went to see the better film. Not that people either love or hate Marvel. People are probably largely ambivalent about the brand. They just want to see good films. Most people, the sort of people who only go to the cinema 4-5 times a year rather than several times a month, they're the sort of people who you need to turn out for something to be a big hit. Obviously, the Marvel heads, such as us, I guess, will be seeing all this stuff.
And yeah, I don't know. Fundamentally, that's not a bad thing. It's probably good for support to be more based on is it good rather than is it vaguely related to a brand I vaguely know. But yeah, I don't know if it still actually leads back to decisions being based on is it based on a brand I vaguely know, and that's less good. Certainly been going that way for a couple of years, so we'll see if it continues to go that way.
Yeah, right.
Right, it's countdown time.
Countdown time. But before we decide what our 5 favourite films of the year were, now is the time to name our worst film of the year. So I will kick off proceedings and say, although there were some very disappointing films of the year that I didn't like, I must say, just a quick note that Code 8 Part 2 was so really, really, really dull that it was really pretty bad. But it's just so dull that it's really hard to get worked up about. So the worst film of the year in my book, my least favourite thing I saw this year was definitely Joker Folie à Deux.
Yep. Folie à me too. Yes, that is also my worst film of the year. It was bad.
Yeah, it was uninspired, largely focused on an irrelevant court case that no one cared about, including the film itself. Lacked tension, kind of lacked direction, had some interesting choices. I mean, one of the good things about it, I suppose, was that they made it a musical and had these songs and stuff, which was at least all right. But after a while of the beat of really saccharine music accompanied by sort of cartoon-style violence, after I'd seen that a few times, I was a bit like, yeah, I kind of get this, and I'm a bit tired of it, to be honest.
Yeah, it just seemed like it didn't really have anything to say beyond the musical beat and indicating stuff from the first film and reiterating it. The decision to focus it all on a trial about the events of the first film really didn't help with the vague feeling that there was just nothing left to do, really. So yeah, this wasn't very good. It was not a particularly competitive decision for me. Obviously, if I got to see some bad films, like I have somewhat got over the need to go and see terrible films just so I can come on this podcast and say they're terrible. So I didn't see Madam Web, and maybe if I had, it would be in this slot. But the worst film I did see, because at the time I thought it might be alright, was Joker 2, and it sucked.
Anyway, so now on a slightly more positive note, time to discuss some honourable mentions, things that either aren't in the top 5 or are disqualified on some level for being in the top 5, such as not being fully released. I'd like to take a moment to mention The Substance, which was an interesting film, and I thought it was one of those films that when it was good, it was really, really good. But the problem is it probably just a bit too uneven to make it into the top 5. It had some great body horror stuff, really gory. Yeah, made a slightly heavy-handed but still good point about beauty standards in showbiz, especially around women. Demi Moore did a great performance. Yeah, it's also kind of not in the top 5 because it is very gory and quite body horror-y and quite visceral in places. So, it's kind of hard to say I really enjoyed it as a film, but it was at least interesting. I think it's deserving of a place as an honourable mention alongside previous notable honourable mentions, including Titane and Crimes of the Future. Usually, yeah, slot for something quite nasty horror each year.
Yeah, my honourable mentions, I have actually got a few, as I say. It wasn't too hard to populate. I really liked Monkey Man. I liked Rebel Ridge. That was a good action film. Poor Things, which I mentioned earlier, very good. Didn't quite make the top 5. And more recently, Heretic. I was surprised how much I enjoyed that.
Yeah, that's all good stuff. Those are pretty much all things that made my sort of extended list of like top 15 that I drew up.
Yeah.
In order to then narrow it down to top 5. So yeah, all things had a good chance. However, none of these discussed films are in the top 5. But what is? Wow. So
okay. Let's go for it.
Right. Number 5, my 5th favourite film of the year, going all the way back to Oscar season. It's The Holdovers. Paul Giamatti playing a sad and depressed school teacher in the 70s in a film that looks like it was made in the 70s, and yeah, really captured the tone, the style, really captured the kind of the look of 70s films. It was just a really sad, moving story. Paul Giamatti's just one of those like fantastic actors. Definitely one of the highlights of Oscar season this year that I am so glad I saw.
Yeah, I haven't seen this at all, but I do gather it's a nice and pleasantly Christmassy film.
Yep, this is also my annual film that we didn't see together that has made the top 5. So that's my number 5. Nick.
My number 5 is actually another quite recent broadcast that has snuck in at the bottom. It is Wallace and Gromit, A Vengeance Most Foul, which I watched over Christmas. is the latest entry in the legendary Aardman series. Yes, another nostalgia sequel coming out literally decades after the last one. Well, at least decades singular, I think. And yeah, this was just really fun. This was a solid return to classic Wallace and Gromit, very much doing the beats they normally do with style and weird humour. And yeah, I laughed throughout. I just found this incredibly entertaining. Is it arguably a film for children? Yes, but I had a great time. I laughed myself silly at this one. Another one like that Doctor Who episode we mentioned that really worked on Christmas Day.
Yeah, nothing wrong about stuff for children. If it's good, it's good. And I loved it as well. Yeah, I watched this on Christmas Day. Yeah, live with the nation to share in that collective moment of togetherness. If we can agree on anything, it's that we all like Wallace and Gromit. Possibly the best version of the British character.
yeah, a rare example of something that's belovedly traditionally British, which I'm not embarrassed to like.
Yeah, and I loved all the puns. So everything from smart gnome, on your doorstep, the ideal getaway, then the high speed, low speed, barge chase, things like that. There was truly cringy puns.
Yeah, and the terrible background puns, another big part of this. I should probably watch it again to catch more of the terrible background puns. It was excellent stuff.
Lovely stuff. So, that was number 5. Number 4, fourth favourite film of the year. It's not one we've discussed on the podcast because I think it just fell between the gaps of when we were recording things. But it is a film I very much enjoyed, and it is Conclave, which made waves at the BFI Film Festival this year. It's a great thriller based on a Richard Harris novel, who's a thriller writer I do really like, starring Ralph Fiennes, John Lithgow and Stanley Tucci. It goes behind the scenes on the internal machination of the Catholic Church involving the choice of a new pope. And yeah, it's one of those films that takes what could be a boring and bureaucratic process and finds electric tension in it. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this too. Might be getting mentioned again later. Yeah, a good film. Considering it is just a film about elderly priests talking in corridors, it's surprising how dynamic and thrilling it is. It's 2 hours long, but it felt shorter. I enjoyed this a lot. And now it's time for my number 4, I believe. And coming in perhaps shamefully low for this podcast, but here it is. It's Dune 2. Or Dune Part 2, or whatever it's technically called. Yep, we both saw this, we covered it, we liked it. I think it was generally agreed it was a slight step down on Part 1, being mostly focused on the action, without quite as much fun world-building stuff, but still interesting, ambitious, lots of enjoyable sort of sci-fi weirdness. Still got the sort of Denis Villeneuve atmosphere / music / weird visuals that we all very much enjoy. So yeah, as I say, I didn't think it quite hit the dizzying heights of the first one, but I thought this was pretty good.
Yeah, strong film. Lots of fun. Really brought the book to life. Dived into a complicated and difficult to portray plot with lots of political analogies and quite experimental writing. Managed to get it all onto screen and make it really entertaining and something that connected with mainstream audiences. So full marks all around.
Yeah, very exciting for everyone, but Dune's actually something mainstream and successful.
Yeah, it was great. Roll on Dune Messiah, which is coming next year from the perspective of the people listening to this. Anyway, continuing on, it's number 3, my third favourite film of the year, which is Challengers, the sexy tennis film starring Zendaya. It's great. It's one of those films that's just like, it's emotional, it's really tense. It's got a brilliant story of, friendship and love between these 3 characters. You really get invested in their relationship. You kind of really feel the ups and downs, the backs and forth, kind of like the tennis balls that go flying.
Sure.
And also in this era of, I guess slightly sexless mainstream entertainment. I think we talked about a film like Free Guy when they even, cuts away from the characters kissing. This, a film that's like genuinely sexy was quite a revelation. But yeah, not in a kind of lurid way, in a more, kind of intense storytelling way. So yeah, Challengers is great. Go see it.
I have not seen this. I believe it is now floating around on Amazon Prime, so I should probably actually watch it. I have heard this is incredibly good, and I have enjoyed Zendaya in many things, from Euphoria to inevitably Spider-Man. So yeah, this does sound very good. Right, and my number 3, another one of the perhaps slightly sexier films of our time, although in a slightly weird and sometimes unsettling way. I speak, of course, of Love Lies Bleeding. This was the lesbian weightlifting film from earlier in the year, which goes towards the end in slightly weird body horror directions. This was a lot of fun. This was very strange, very affecting, and at times almost surprisingly heartwarming. Yeah, no, I really like this.
Yeah, this was a great film. I enjoyed it a lot. It was excellent. Yeah, it's got that sort of 80s style down. It's a kind of pastiche on a lot of like kind of 80s pulp films, but yeah, we're putting women in the driver's seat this time. So it was good. It was original. It was interesting. It had great visual style. I also liked the way that, it was quite a down-to-earth kind of, again, pulpy, crimey story, but then would occasionally veer into these sort of, is this really happening, magical realism moments that really added something that, kind of elevated the film. So yeah, I like this a lot.
Coming to the end now.
We're moving on up. So, my second favourite film of the year, really into the top things, is I Saw the TV Glow. Film we absolutely raved about on the podcast. It's beautiful, it's moving, it's stunning. Again, it's got that slightly magical realism, slightly odd bit of like, is what we're seeing real? Is it, or just an expression of a character's inner emotional state? And it was just really devastating, really powerful, really moving. It used nostalgia in a great way to tell a great story about, memory and identity rather than just being a nostalgic film about the 90s. So yeah, good stuff.
Yeah, no, I love this. This, as they say, shout me up. This was a really strange, unsettling, unique film about, identity and what if I wasn't really me, all filtered through a lens of, the 90s cult shows that people of our age all remember all too well, starting at the very beginning of, like, intense geek fandom. Yeah, no, this was fantastic. This was singularly, atmospherically brilliant. I loved this film. And I also quite enjoyed my number 2, which is a film we've already mentioned. It's Conclave, sneaking in towards the end to go high. Probably my hardest decision on this chart was batting Love Lies Bleeding and Conclave back and forth, and it's possible there's a bit of recency bias in Conclave winning out. But yeah, I just found this a really, really, really compelling thriller, which riveted me to the screen in a way that a lot of films haven't quite managed this year. So yeah, love them priests. There's a lot of great actors doing amazing work. John Lithgow, Stanley Tucci, Ralph Fiennes. Yeah, I actually think this has been slightly slept on, and I don't usually participate that much in the Oscar predictions. I normally leave that to Alastair because he normally sees more of the films. But surely this has to win at least something, guys. Come on. What are you doing if not?
Yeah, I hope this gets lots of praise at the Oscars this year because it was really, really good. It created waves at the London Film Festival. It was one of the things everyone said was very, very good. Go see it. In retrospect, I definitely should have gone to see it at the film festival. But yeah, it is a great film. It's probably in cinemas now, still about if you get the chance to see it. As well as the cast members you mentioned who are great. I also really liked Isabella Rossellini playing a nun. She's great as well. As is Lucien Masmati, who I also saw on the stage this year. He's a great actor. So yeah, great casting all around for this film.
Yeah, no, really good stuff, as I say, for a film about priests. Surprisingly thrilling. Right, and that was my number 2, which means it's time for the Alastair film of the year.
Well, obviously there's one that's conspicuous by its absence, so you probably have guessed exactly where this is going. But yep, my favourite film of the year was Dune Part 2.
I did guess that.
Yeah, which was probably a foregone conclusion. It's great. I loved it. Yeah, absolutely nailed a book that's been a favourite of mine for most of my life. Did justice to the story. And yeah, I'd also just want to take a moment to shout out, the excellent cast. Everyone was superbly well cast in their role. Great work from Villeneuve and his casting director for choosing everyone. Yeah, Timothy Chalamet, Zendaya, Florence Pugh, Rebecca Ferguson, Christopher Walken. I mean, if you just keep going on, there's about 20 big names in this. But yeah, it's just great, and I'm so glad it connected with audiences and it really paid off. We'll see if people like Dune Messiah. It's a bit of an odd book, even by Dune standards, but I'm just glad that this was a success and people really liked it. So yeah, and it really made my year.
Yeah, no, this was really good. It was really fun to go and see this on opening night or close to opening night. It was a good time. My film of the year is one that's already been mentioned, as you may have guessed from my effusive praise of it and the amount that I raved about it in the review and yet have not yet mentioned it. It is I Saw the TV Glow, which, as I say, just really got under my skin, really keyed into my issues. I don't know, I always find the vague how preoccupied are we with nostalgia, what has happened to the world thing quite interesting, as well as the identity struggles and stuff. I don't know, it just got under my skin. I can see that it's quite maybe a polarising film. I know people who have seen this and really not connected with it at all. I think it's quite a cold film. I don't think it's, necessarily inviting you in to come and like it. It's similar to what I said earlier about Dune Prophecy. But I do think it's one of those ones where if you connect with it, you'll probably really, really, like might be a strong word, but find it really, really gets under your skin. And yeah, I thought this was one of the best films of, I'm literally saying it's the best film of the year. So yeah, great stuff. I don't know if it'll win at the Oscars. I don't know if it's the right sort of film, but I'm hedging my bets on Conclave on that one because I think Conclave is very much the right sort of film. But this is amazing and people should sit.
Yeah, it's probably too low profile for the Oscars, but you never know. There's always precedent of everything. But it was great, yeah, really affecting, powerful movie. I thought the cast was excellent, especially the two leads. Yeah, Justice Smith and Bridget Lundy Payne. Yeah, playing the two main characters. Yeah, you see them over quite a long period as it jumps through time and they age and stuff. And yeah, they kind of really good at portraying the sort of weird sense of unreality that the whole movie takes place within. So yeah, they should get a lot of praise and hopefully go on to great things in the future.
Yeah, I hope so. And hopefully I'll manage to go and see whatever the director does next, because that's interesting stuff. Right.
Right.
Negotiation time. To be fair, I think it'll be quite an easy negotiation. I believe the 3 big communal films are I Saw the TV Glow, Conclave, and Dune 2, aren't
Yeah, they are the ones, yeah. As we both put I Saw the TV Glow really high, and I think we should shout out these independent films that do well. I Saw the TV Glow number 1, then Dune, then Conclave.
Yeah. I'm good with that. I am happy to put Dune above Conclave, as you know, this is an Alastair podcast, and therefore Dune should be quite high. So yeah, I'm good with those 3 as our big films of the year. See them all.
Yep, there you have it. I Saw the TV Glow, MFV, top film of 2024.
Yes.
Right, that was top films of the year, and now top TV of the year, where we will repeat the same exercise, but it'll be about television, beginning with a summary of how things have been on the small screen for this year. And I guess overall, again, no real signs of change. We still have many streaming platforms, and there hasn't been a big consolidation. I don't think any of the major ones have gone out of business. If anything, there's plans for more streaming platforms with, I think, HBO Max coming to the UK at some point.
I think we have reached possibly a point of streaming bubble. Like, there has definitely been, I think, a move to maybe pile slightly less content onto the streaming platforms. I know it never feels like it, just due to the onslaught of stuff we've never got round to watching from previous years. But I do think the speed with which original material has just been piled onto these platforms has slowed down a little bit. I mean, like Disney famously, well, semi-famously, decided to change Moana 2 from being a Disney Plus series to a cinematic film. I think similar things have happened to a few other things. I think a lot of the shows that were going to be Max originals have now just been released on HBO as telly. So I think there is a certain level of maybe realising that directing all their content just to go on these websites to be watched by paying subscribers was perhaps not the best use of it, and they should maybe dial that back a bit. So I think there is a little bit of a sign that the streaming thing might be maybe coming towards its end. I don't know. I think we've also seen other reductions in things throughout, like similar to what I was saying about conservatism in films. In TV shows, we're seeing shorter seasons, we're seeing longer gaps between seasons as they put off making a decision about renewing them. We're seeing a lot of TV shows that seem to be sort of vaguely partnered to existing franchises in ways that is increasingly tenuous, which I guess isn't entirely new, but if anything, as Marvel dials it down, other people seem to be dialing it up, as we have The Penguin, Jude Prophecy, Dexter Original Sin, which, spoilers, we'll probably be covering on this podcast soon enough. I don't know. There's a downtick in content, but also an uptick in prequel shit, which I can't say pleases me. It again feels very conservative.
I mean, we'll see if Dexter Original Sin turns out to be prequel shit, unlike the discussion of...
I mean, it's definitely a prequel. We'll see if it's shit.
Yeah, well, basically, yeah, pretty much, yeah. But unlike the discussion of House of the Dragon and Dune Prophecy at the beginning of this season, this is something that's set mere years before the original show, not 10,000 years or even, a few hundred years. So the potential for prequel shit is high. Yeah, and I don't know if this is more just a nostalgic cash-in or if it's people who really think that like Dexter has franchise potential.
I mean, they're doing 2 seasons of, 2 different shows, allegedly, in the next year or 2 alone, so clearly someone does. I think, I don't know, it's difficult, because on the one hand, I'm kind of in favour of a bit less content and a bit more consolidation, just in terms of, fewer, better shows. But also, I do feel that the move towards shorter runs and less episodes isn't, I don't know, it's kind of getting away from the core of what a lot of people liked about television. I mean, the big thing people say when they view the stats for the most watched things on streaming platforms is, it feels like streaming platforms are putting all this money into making new content, yet people are just endlessly watching Suits and The Office. And, does that just say more about our horrendous nostalgia-driven culture? Or does it suggest that those old shows, which were made in a more episodic way rather than just endless chopped-up movies and 6-episode runs, have something that is perhaps missing?
Yeah, probably a bit of both, to be honest, yeah. I mean, some people, I think, they do like the nostalgic comfort of something that reminds them of their childhood, reminds them of their past when they felt things were better or whatever. There's also the fact that, people like to watch things that they've seen before because, they don't find upsetting twists and they know that things are going to end well, or at least the show's going to maintain its quality, or there's not going to be a surprise, a massive drop in quality. But also, I think there is an element of, people like Adventures of the Week, Case of the Week. They also like things to be longer as well, because something you can really get into, such as like, I can sit down on my Saturday off and watch 6 episodes back to back of I don't know, House or Friends or Suits or Monk or whatever it is. I do appreciate the fact that, shows have gotten shorter because, we've complained enough about, those Marvel Netflix shows that ran for 13 episodes that were unnecessary and there was a lot of patter. And, I think Dune Prophecy does benefit from being 6 episodes, not 13, if that's the plot they had. But I also think that people like long shows because they can really get stuck into them, especially if it's not, 14 episodes of one arc plot, like 14 episodes of Case of the Week or whatever.
I think, the thing that people are missing is specifically episodic Case of the Week stuff, which has got increasingly out of fashion, and in the occasions where people have tried to keep doing it, as in Poker Face or Doctor Who, to use something I mentioned earlier, it's slightly undercut by the fact there aren't that many episodes to do it in by the time you've done a big series premiere and finale and had time for like 4 cases of the week in the middle. Now you're doing like 6 to 8 episode seasons. And I think people do miss that. I mean, the issue obviously is that, like everything in our trick capitalist existence, it comes down to, people are less willing to throw money at 22 episodes a year of TV when the market seems willing to allow them to get away with 6 to 10, because I guess doing Cases of the Week stuff may well be more expensive if it involves bringing in more guest actors, more costumes or effects or whatever to represent all the different things.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, a lot of these Case of the Week shows, like, House or Suits or things like that, they did mainly take place in the same sets over and over, which is how they kept it cheap. Maybe there's something that now we've lost our appetite for literally something that's as new and formulaic as they solve a different legal problem each week by hanging out in the same office with the same group of people.
I think there's still some level of appetite for it, and I'd be interested to see if someone could work out how to crack it in a way that, I don't know, the streaming networks allow them to make. I mean, every so often you get something, like I've seen both seasons of Star Trek Strange New Worlds, and that's definitely trying to scratch the Case of the Week or Episode of the Week, Planet of the Week.
Yeah, Planet of the Week.
By doing something different in every episode. Sometimes to the point that it's a bit disorientating, to be honest, but anyway, not reviewing that. But yeah, I think it is something that as seasons get shorter and shorter and shorter, now that we're down to 6 to 8 episodes, and all the Americans who used to lord it over Brits with their stupid 6-episode seasons, it's like, oh, well, it's your life now, buddy.
Yeah, we all live in the same world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think, especially, people in the States who are very, very used to their 22-episode seasons have been starting to get increasingly agitated about where they've gone.
Yeah, and I could do with fewer films, like long films chopped up into 6-hour chunks, although that said, with some of the things that I put in my top 5. But
yes, that's what they're actually making, it's a top 5 of this year.
Yeah. But for example, I did really like Poker Face of previous year because the Case of the Week format really worked well. But then again, I'm not particularly nostalgic for Monk or even Buffy or something like that. I don't want a Case of the Week show just for the sake of a Case of the Week show. I guess what I want is, saying about film is I'll watch a show that's good, So
I do want things to be good, but I do think a big appeal of things like TV shows and like those sort of serialized stories, similar with like ongoing comics, is the ability to get under the character's skin and see them go through their little soap opera lives.
Yeah.
And like even things like The West Wing had a very strong, I don't know, what do you want to call it, political event of the week angle.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, The West Wing is very much, it's on the transitions along with shows like, Lost and 24 and things like that were, the point when we moved to this world of only arc plot when, there was obviously
big... wasn't that arc driven. Every episode had a plot and the arc just sort of ticks along in the background.
Yeah, apart from like the few big ones where it just lurched forwards, usually towards the end of the season.
Well, yeah, but that's what Buffy did as well.
Yeah, and that's what shows do generally. And they've been doing ever since days of MASH or whatever. Yeah, but The West Wing is kind of like, it's a workplace soap opera and things like that. It was very much pitched when it originally came on TV as it's like a show, you see behind the scenes of a workplace. You've seen this with ER in hospitals, you've seen this with Ally McBeal in law offices, but this time it's the White House. And obviously it's become this totemic thing because it had a lot to say about politics and had these great performances and these great writing, and they gave them the money to shoot it on film so it looks gorgeous. But all that stuff is kind of in retrospect. At the time it was kind of like, you want your workplace show of the week? Yeah, but this one, the White House.
I don't know, we've been vaguely talking about the difference between, arc shows and episodic shows since we started doing this podcast 8 bloody years ago. To some listening, this may all seem quite samey. But yeah, I think it's interesting, to me at least, as the American season has gotten steadily shorter, it seems to be more and more of a topic in the wider world as well. Mostly in the context of, episodic TV. Where did you go?
Yeah. I mean, there has been a lot of good sequels this year, I felt, in that there's been, a lot of stuff has been picked up. I mean, one of the things about this other age is that you get years between seasons sometimes. And, like there's big gaps. Things don't come out like, one a year. Like, as we said before, who knows when this second series in the Dune Prophecy will actually happen. But I did feel that this year we got, new seasons of Arcane, The Diplomat, Slow Horses, Invincible, Extraordinary, We Are Lady Parts, House of the Dragon, and Our Flag Means Death. And they were all pretty good. So, they definitely can pick up the threads of good stuff and make more of it, which is what people like. So that was cheering to see.
Although several years between the seasons of quite a few of the things you mentioned, including Arcane and Lady Parts.
And Dragon as well. So
because the other thing people moan about is the seasons are getting shorter and the gaps are getting longer.
Yeah.
Which again is kind of gets in the way of this kind of sequential immersion people are craving.
Yeah, people like stuff, that like things did in the past. Adventures of the Week, and you get a season every year. They don't take 2-3 years off between seasons.
Yeah, exactly. The Bear coming out every year is good. Only Murders does it as well. It's very easy to massively appreciate, even though Only Murders is not in my top 5, but it's a good show. It comes out every year, and this year's season was particularly good, but it's always solid.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so people like that sort of stuff. Yeah, there's lots of shows that do that, and I would prefer it if more shows did, come out reliably every year, so you don't forget quite heavily who everyone is and exactly what's going on.
Yeah,
especially the slightly more complicated ones.
Arcane.
Yeah, but at the same time, there's a lot of good stuff, and it is worth pointing out that you do have to wait for these things, but they come around and they can be good. I guess I'd rather them make a good season of House of the Dragon rather than just rush out something that's a bit half baked. But also, I would like them to deliver something that's good on a timely manner, and they did that in the past. So I'm not asking for the moon on the stick here.
I don't know. The premium TV model has arguably, and I'm sure a lot of this is, again, good old money, but I think it has given a certain amount of permission to, stall till it can be perfect or whatever, when I think in the past, the need to just get something out every week. Yes, sometimes it's led to things just plummeting off a cliff, but there's a certain amount of energy there as well, Yeah,
if you have to turn out 26 episodes of Happy Days a year, eventually they're going to get derivative.
Well, yeah, but the pulpy energy of, we have to keep advancing the story. If you could harness that energy and make it work for you, like Breaking Bad, which did come out pretty clockworkly, that's a word, pretty much like clockwork most years for its duration. I mean, if you watch some of the podcasts and documentaries or whatever about its making, they made that stuff up on the fly more than you'd think between seasons. Obviously they knew what was going to happen when they planned out the season, but they didn't have a 5-year master plan the way you might sort of expect from watching it. And it's interesting to see the sort of, good energy that can come out of that if you're talented and do it right.
Yeah, and to not tie your hands in the future or things like that, kind of like Lost did. I mean, a lot has been made of the fact that cinemas become more like TV with things like, MCU feeling more like a TV show with kind of season finales in Avengers films. But also in some ways, TV's become more like film in the sense that you don't get, a Die Hard film each year or a Terminator film each year. Sometimes there's big gaps between them. It's because stuff comes out when it's ready and when people are inclined to do it, rather than being, you have to do one a year. So I guess it's some ways in which in this sort of digital streaming age when all the content's on different platforms and most of the stuff is consumed via these platforms, and you're choosing whether you're watching, a film tonight or another episode of a TV show, all the media's kind of getting blended together and stuff, which kind of undermines this whole film and TV top 5 thing. But anyway.
Oh, shit. But yeah, I think, this is referring back to the film stuff, but I think it's also possibly reduced people's willingness or desire to go and spend money on cinema tickets because, it's all the same shit. You might as well watch it all at home.
Yeah, cinema's quite expensive, and you can now watch Dune 2 in the privacy of your own home on your massive screen, and for not much difference in price. So I think people are opting with their feet. Although, see Dune 2 on the biggest screen possible. We saw it in IMAX. But anyway, enough of the praise of Dune.
Yeah, I mean, the other major TV trend I have in my notes is I've been interested to see the fact that British television seems to be making a bit of a comeback on streaming services. There seems to be an increasing trend of the big streaming networks creating not shows with British actors pretending to be American, but actually British shows taking place in Britain with British casts just funded by big streaming networks. Things like Slow Horses, I think, was one of the first ones to really take off. But since then, we've had Rivals, Extraordinary, The Devil's Hour, I haven't seen, but is very much one of those shows. I think there's another one with Peter Capaldi on Apple TV with him playing a cop that I've forgotten the name of.
Yep, Renegade Now, another one.
Renegade Now, yep, another show I believe I described as the spiritual successor to Merlin, being made by an American streaming network. So yeah, it's interesting, I guess, that they have finally decided to not just pillage the British actors to play Americans, but actually make what is basically British TV and put it on streaming networks, or sometimes co-fund it with with the old UK companies.
I mean, for a long time, the British film and TV industry has been really good at nurturing talent and developing things and creating a pipeline, because as a nation, we do feel that like arts and entertainment, especially like film and TV, popular culture entertainment, is something that we excel in and things like that. Everything from, you know, the Beatles through to Star Wars was made in this country and has, you know, some high profile British actors in it. There's always been that element of British culture really punching above its weight, and the government and things like that have supported the film industry. It's only in recent years, and they've really taken the axe to the subsidies and the programs that kind of keep this going. So we'll see what happens. Maybe, you know, we're kind of seeing the benefit of that by like lots of talent that's come up through this pipeline, both, you know, behind and in front of the camera, is, you know, clearing up in this age of streaming services when there is big production budgets out there which you can grab with your good ideas, because, you know, these big tech companies with deep pockets are in a war for our attention and they're willing to spend money. That's why, again, someone like Will Smith, not the rapper, the guy who worked on the thick of it, can go to a huge company like Apple and go, I've got these great spy novels, I want to shoot them in central London with, you know, a kind of A-star cast. Please open your checkbook. It's probably not something the BBC can realistically afford to do, but Apple, yeah, it's nothing them compared to probably the amount they spend, I don't know, yeah, making, it's one of those huge epic cinema films. So yeah, and it works because if you've got the talent and you've got the material, you can go to these people and get this stuff done well. And we are seeing the benefits of that. Will that continue now that the government's not supporting the creative industries in this country as much as they used to? I guess we'll see.
I mean, it's been a lot more, I don't know, it seems like, based on the anecdotes I read, you know, films being shot in the UK seems to have picked up a lot in the last post-COVID few years. So I don't know whether that's led to people thinking, rather than just filming a lot of stuff in Britain, pretending it's America, or possibly pretending it's the planet Zarg, shall we, you know, just make some British telly with all the British talent we're using, and, you know, maybe we won't have to pay as much to fly them over, and, you know, maybe Americans will watch it, which I think is paying off to certainly some degree. I gather Slow Horses is actually doing quite well with, like, not just us in the UK, but the American audience as well. So yeah.
Also, the breaking down of language barriers and cultural barriers through streaming services means that everything's there on one platform. You can find whatever you want. It means that, you know, Americans are gravitating towards British shows that are maybe, you know, a bit different, a bit unusual. Like, you know, there's lots made of how Americans really like Great British Bake Off because it's a reality show and it's fun and nice and things like that. Americans also really like Love Island again because it's, you know, something that's connected with them, and it's aimed at a mainstream audience and it's connecting through the platforms. I mean, you know, I've discovered all sorts of bizarre sci-fi from all over the world through streaming platforms, such as, you know, from everything from Dark to Alice in the Borderland. And I'm no surprise that Americans are discovering British content this way and British creators. And the streaming platform have the stats, so they're picking up on this.
Yeah, which at least superficially is good. If it continues, that'd be interesting. It'd be nice to actually watch more British shows. I just noticed that I seem to have watched a lot of shows actually set in Britain with British actors this year, yet curiously still not gone on the iPlayer that much.
Interesting.
There we go. Right, shall we get down to counting down?
Right, but before that, we have the sad news to announce.
Oh yes, the worst. The victim of the year.
Yes, the worst bit of TV we sat through this year.
Shall I go first?
Yes, Nick, lead us away.
Right, okay.
Let's see if we agree.
It was actually quite a competitive, good year of TV this year. I really struggled to get this down to a top 10. My honourable mentions list is not insubstantial.
Yep, I also, this year, really struggled to get it down to a top 5. There were a couple of things that really were hard and very narrowly missed out in the top 5.
Yeah, so there'll be some substantial honourable mentioning in a minute. But before all that, the worst thing of the year, which to be honest actually was quite easy to choose because I didn't watch that much garbage this year, because I'm a good boy with good taste. The worst of the year is Umbrella Academy Season 4. I just found this to be a massive drag and a really disappointing end to a show which has never been amazing, but has always been kind of reliably entertaining. And this was not entertaining, this was a slog. There's a few good bits scattered here and there, but mostly it was just a previously okay show farting its way to a dismal end.
Yep, this is also my worst film of the year. Really didn't like it. Yeah, really sad ending to what was an entertaining show. As you say, just sort of plot shot off in random directions, didn't make sense, and then, yeah, there was almost no tension in the actual ending, as the characters just stood around and literally waited for the show to end. And, yeah, wasn't very good. So, sorry about that.
Yep, there we go. No chance to redeem yourself because you're finished. Right. Anyway, honourable mentions. I've got a couple. In fact, I could go for about 10, but I'll keep it relatively brisk. The 3 things that I narrowly missed off the bottom of the top 5, which probably could and even should have been in there, were Rivals, which I watched recently, the blockbuster adaptation of the Jilly Cooper novel. That's the correct term. On Disney Plus, with an all-star cast, including David Tennant and Aidan Turner. Very much one of those British shows on streaming services, which by all accounts has been a massive hit, and yeah, deservedly. It's really, really fun. If this were more what I guess you call my regular sort of thing, it may well be higher up the charts, but even coming at it from as a not that big appreciator of the sort of saucy romance genre, yeah, this was really, really fun. I enjoyed it a lot. Rivals, good show. As was The Traitors, the only reality show I've ever put in one of these charts, but yeah, fuck it, I've watched both seasons of this. It was good fun. To specify, this is the UK one with Claudia Winkleman. I've not yet got round to the many international versions. And Slow Horses. I love it. I've mentioned it here already. It narrowly missed the top 5, but it's still very good.
Yeah, a few honourable mentions. I'm actually going to mention a few things lower down the chart to preserve the tension over what did and didn't make it into the top 10. But some things I thought was really great, which was great to see them come back, included We Are Lady Parts, great second season. I thought that Mr. and Mrs. Smith show was a really interesting, understated drama. That was pretty cool. I liked The Three Body Problem. I really liked the book, and they did a pretty good version of that, which I enjoyed. Well done, Netflix. And it was nice for Our Flag Means Death to have a lovely happy ending and to wrap up well. And everyone to get a nice happy ending. So that was all nice. Right.
On to the counting. Right. So, number 5, the only superhero thing you'll hear me mentioning in this chart. It's X-Men 97. We tuned in. I expected it to be a sort of nice little nostalgic retread, maybe featuring some ironic lols, and it turned out to be probably the best X-Men adaptation I've seen. Genuinely both quite a fun depiction of these characters, but also fully engaging with the mutant metaphor of discrimination, and also featuring some of the most dramatic, harrowing shit I saw on TV this year. Yeah, absolutely great. Really enjoyed this. By far the best superhero thing I watched this year. I gather there's been some behind the scenes drama with the showrunner, so who knows if subsequent seasons will be as good, but this one does actually wrap itself quite nicely, to be honest. There's a few trailers at the end for future seasons, but honestly, this is just great.
Yeah, no, I enjoyed this a lot. We'll be revisiting it in the list. But yeah, this could have been such easily a nostalgic cash-in that didn't really add anything, but actually turned out just to be great entertainment in its own right. Really good show. So, my number 5. We've already discussed it. One of Nick's honourable mentions. Again, it was really hard to choose, especially what was going to be in the 5th position, because there's so many good candidates. But it was Slow Horses, Season 4. The show continues to run from strength to strength. And yeah, it was another great year. Tense, exciting, excellent cast. Jack Lowden, Gary Oldman, they're all great. It's just an ace show, and they keep making great shows.
Yeah, no, this is, having spoken about, I don't know, ongoing episode of the week telly, it just keeps rolling and keeps giving you more good adventures with good characters. This, even though it is, I guess, an arc-based show, it does very much give you that feeling of familiar characters doing the thing again and always doing it well and always being charming and always finding different angles on the same characters to keep them fresh while still perpetuating our attachment to them. Yeah, no, this is proper good TV. This is excellent.
Yeah, good episode of the week content.
Yeah, no, a really good time. Number 4, another show we've already mentioned for similar reasons to what we just said. It's last year's number 1. It's The Bear. This is, the critically beloved drama about a guy turning his family's beef joint into an upmarket... I don't know why that's funny. Into an upmarket restaurant. And this was, I think, a slightly more polarising, or at least uncertainly received season than the previous couple. I think there were a few episodes where the pacing was a bit off. There was the vague sense that the finale made it feel more like a halfway point in a 2-season arc rather than an actual ending, which I think is probably why it's down here. But there's still some excellent episodes, some great standalone stuff, including there was a great episode about one of the characters giving birth, another flashback to how one of the characters reached the restaurant, and just a lot of great moments with the character we love. I think based on my brief reading of other people's charts, other people have this a bit lower than me, but I, apart from like one episode but I think slightly misfired, I thought this was still pretty excellent throughout, and it definitely needed to be on the top 5 somewhere.
Yeah, no, I love this. This is one of 2 shows that really narrowly missed out on being in the top 5, was in the top 5 at one point, and then on a re-examination I just felt that Slow Horses pipped it to the post. But I think the show's great. I like the fact they make a series every year. Shock, horror, imagine that.
Wow.
Yeah, it's funny, it's moving, it's got some great episodes. I really liked the giving birth episode. Yeah, it was like a play, just 2 people in a room, really good character moments. It's really funny in places, it's really sad in places. Long may the reign of the bear continue. So there's on to my number 4, which is, yes, we've already discussed it, X-Men 97. Yeah. It was great. Really strong political message to this show, which I loved a lot. Tapping into that classic X-Men civil rights discourse, making it, it all about people being oppressed and how violent and discriminatory the world can be. And in this age of escalating violence, it's good to see a show really putting that front and centre and reaching a mainstream audience. There's a lot of people who don't go to see harrowing documentaries about genocide at the London Film Festival, but putting it in mainstream entertainment and making it accessible and just telling some great stories with some great characters is very moving. So this was a huge success.
Yeah, no, I think I already said my piece on this, but yeah, this was surprisingly excellent. Really enjoyed it. Watch it if you haven't. Looking forward to that second season. Right, and number 3, another big show of the year, another one that is very high on many of the old end-of-year critic lists. It's Shogun, the adaptation of the James Clavell novel about a lone British man who must now stagger around Japan, having social misunderstandings and sword fights, and getting involved in the local political intrigue. And yeah, this was just really good. This was a really strong drama about just a few characters bouncing off each other and exploring this wider society, and yeah, just really had a great sense of the epic and the thoughtful that was really enjoyable to watch.
Yep, this is also my third favourite show of the year, so we're totally agreed on this. And yeah, I thought this was electric, real tense drama, lots of great interesting stuff about the use of language and cultural barriers. Yeah, this was a great series. Yeah, one of those surprise things of the year in that I didn't even know they were making this. I gather it's a successful series of novels, but yeah, definitely not something that was in my radar until it exploded across the culture with a sense of, stop what you're doing right now, go watch this. And I did, and it was great.
Yep, there we go. First moment of consensus. I am now about to slightly veer off the consensus by covering something that I don't believe Alastair has watched.
No, I don't believe we have the same number 2, because I'd be very surprised.
Yeah. Number 2 is Baby Reindeer on Netflix, which I watched recently along with Rivals in an attempt to flesh out my top 10 list a bit. And yeah, this was excellent. I can see why a lot of people got excited about this. I believe I covered it in the recommendation section in the previous podcast episodes. I probably shouldn't repeat myself at enormous length, but this is, the popular stalking drama on Netflix, which really dug into a lot of harrowing emotional territory in a really both entertaining but also quite upsetting and thoughtful way. Good show. Liked it.
Yes, I have not seen this, but it is another thing that exploded across popular consciousness, coming out of nowhere, not being another series of an established show like The Bear or based on an established franchise, but it did grab everyone's attention seemingly by just being really, really good, becoming a water cooler moment for the year, and just spreading via word of mouth. It's one of the few shows that I've really seen discussed widely outside the geeky circles I move in, who are more likely to discuss, X-Men or The Bear. So it does seem to have really connected with a wide mainstream audience, and really hooks people in. So it's always nice when there's a surprise each year of something coming out of nowhere and being a hit.
Yeah.
So, number 2, my second favourite thing of the year, and it was Arcane Season 2. I just love this show to bits. It's, phenomenal, really, really good fun, amazing artwork, really dense, complicated, intertwined plot. But at the core, it's just these two great characters of the two sisters, and the other supporting characters around them are great as well. But the relationship between the two sisters at its core kind of makes this show amazing. And it's got great punk style, music, art. So what's not to like?
I believe, again, we covered this last episode, and yes, in the last episode, and I believe I've said I thought this was pretty good, but not quite a patch for the first season, and it did not quite make the old top 10. But this was a good show. It definitely has a distinct style and a strong emotional story, which is very easy to connect with. So
cool. Right, one left each.
Show of the year.
Will there be consensus?
I very much doubt it.
Right, so big moment, Nick.
Okay, my show of the year. In the past, there has been a rule wherein if I decide to go off and binge an entire run of the show and it happens to air some episodes in that same year, it'll probably be my number 1 because I just get immersed in that shit. I go deep. I go native. Possibly, is that the word? Yes, this year's show that took out a huge chunk of my time and I just absolutely got into and loved was For All Mankind on Apple TV, the show about an alternate reality in which the Russians won the space race and as a result the US decided to damn well continue it. And yes, I watched all 4 seasons of this, and I believe about half of season 4, possibly slightly less than half of season 4, aired in January 2024. Therefore it is eligible and therefore it is here. So I love this. This is one of my favourite premium telly shows of recent years. I'm looking forward to the 5th season. They've also announced a spin-off, which I might watch, I don't know. But season 5 of this I'm definitely looking forward to. This is really good. And yes, I try not to dump recommendations on Alastair too much and really try and say, you really should watch this, mate, because, he's got a very busy schedule. He often seems overwhelmed by the volume of content in the world, but I do really think he'd enjoy this.
No, absolutely, no, I do really want to watch it. It is on the list of things to watch. I will be getting into it. Actually, I'll set myself the deadline of the new season, whenever it is. Probably it's not next week. But, I've heard lots of great things about this show. I've heard it's one of the great modern sci-fi shows. So I'm looking forward to diving into it. And the fact that it's Nick's number 1 show of the year is just even more emphasis just to get stuck in.
Yes, plus I believe it's co-show run by Ron Moore of Battlestar Galactica and Deep Space Nine fame. So
yes,
hopefully there's some precedent for you enjoying his work.
Yes, both shows that I very much enjoy. And finally, my number 1 show of the year, one we discussed a while back, but it's left a strong impression. It is Scavenger's Reign, the beautiful, weird weird, slightly solar punk show about the spaceship that crashes on the planet, with all the beautiful and strange life forms in this super sophisticated and complex ecosystem they've developed, I think, inventing more than 50 different plants and animals to populate this world. And a really sweet story. It's great TV. Yeah, I loved it.
Yeah, no, this was fantastic. It hasn't quite made the top 5, but will probably be appearing on the full top 10 in the website, because this was an amazing show. This was a really meditative, immersive experience in a way that, I don't know, did it remind me a bit of I Saw the TV Glow? I don't know. It just really, I don't know, it was getting a lot of like feeling and visceral sensation out of not necessarily going that deep on like over-involved plotting or world building. It was just very, very easy to just get lost in. Yeah, no, this show was great.
Yeah. No, brilliant stuff. Yeah, I think there's a similarity to I Saw the TV Glow in that it's not something that has like huge explosions or like drama with people like screaming at each other in it, but it has a real like simmering tension, strong emotions, and a really strong immersive vibe to it, that kind of slow burn but gets under your skin. Especially this show, I kind of cannoned through it all quite quickly for the podcast. Yeah, this has been a thing in the past. Did this with The Bear as well, both this year and previous years. If it's got to the point where I've kind of zipped something down in a whole week, then it usually again rises to the top of my list, and it's good. I really get immersed in it.
Yeah,
things like The Bear, The Last of Us in previous years, and things like that.
Yeah, no, it's not on my list. Well, not my top 5 anyway, but this was fantastic as well. It was just, as I said, a very competitive year. Some
very hard year.
This year.
Yeah, also, again, things like The Diplomat nearly made the cut, The Penguin, Invincible, so yeah.
Yeah. A lot of those on the list as well.
Yeah. Good stuff. Well, I'll look forward to reading your full top 10 what's on the website, but before then, we need to draw up the concise MFV top 3.
The consensus. So is this going to be some combination of
Shogun,
X-Men, and I don't know, Scavenger's Reign or Slow Horses?
Is Shogun the highest rated joint thing?
Yes, It was number 3 for both of us. So I guess number 1, Shogun.
X-Men, Scavenger's Reign?
Yeah, I'll give it that.
There you have it. Shogun sitting proud as the MFV Best TV Show of the Year. It was damn good. Right, so that is our countdowns. However, there's still more end-of-year content on our website. If you head there now and you want more of this sort of thing, you can read Nick's full top 10 of the year, including his stats corners, where you can find out what's gone up, what's gone down, and what didn't make the cut. You can also read my summary of the year in film under the title 2024, A Year in Film. Those are both on the website for you now.
Should really like that.
Yes. These voices are coming to you from the past.
It'll definitely have happened by the time you hear it. Okay, and that was it. Thank you for listening to Moderate Fantasy Violence in 2024. If you want still more, you can go to our website at moderatefantasyviolence.com, where you can find all our past episodes and, as Alastair just said, articles by us, including our exciting end-of-year articles. And if you like that whole experience, then why not leave us a nice 5-star review on whatever application you listen to your podcasts on. Thank you very much.
And if you want even more from us, then you can find us on Facebook by searching for Moderate Fantasy Violence, Twitter by searching for MFV Podcast, and Blue Sky for searching for MFV Podcast. You can also get more from me on Blue Sky, Twitter, and Instagram by searching for Alastair Ball, or you can find more of my writing at redtrainblog.com, or find my theatre reviews at Everything Theatre.
And you can find more from me at nickbryan.com, or by searching Nick Bryan on various apps. That's Bryan with a Y, and looking for my little red, angry-looking cartoon avatar. And then you can hear all sorts of things about my thoughts on various comics, the TV and film I've been watching, and there will, of course, be more comic Kickstarters in the new year, which it now is, so in this year. And yes, that aside, you could also join us in 2 weeks' time, when we will be covering the new series of Marvel's What If, the new and last series, which does of course mean another countdown for fans of countdowns, and then we'll be going back and taking a look at the last series of Lower Decks, the Star Trek cartoon show that we've enjoyed in the past. Okay, so that's in 2 weeks, and thank you very much for listening. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Happy New Year.
Amazing.
Music, and then